Hello everyone. Am I live? I've been having some connection issues and it claimed I was online, then it said I wasn't, then it said I was, and then it said it wasn't, and now it claims I am. So hopefully this time you can all hear me. So if somebody in the chat could give me a quick, yes, Andy, I can actually hear you, and I will go over and check over on the good old Twitch side just to make sure that everything is going over there too. It claims you can hear me, so I'm going to presume that you can. Go. Excellent. So welcome to another Ask Andy Anything, where I will be taking your questions about, well, anything. I've had quite the fun day today, particularly because Lindsay's currently over in the house, out in the back over there outside the office, and she's currently porting somewhere in the region of about 300 games into the house, slowly but surely stacking them up into our shelves. We had them put away in storage after we received a flood, which was pretty nasty, but it's really nice to have them back. So I'm going to be diving through all of those later. Right, so like all of my Ask Me Anythings, we're just going to take whatever comes. Super chats always come first, purely because thank you very much for supporting the LAWhammer channel and everything that we do here, and I'll just dive straight in because why waste any time. We're also going to be doing a stream over inside the Rookery at 7 p.m. UK time, which is about an hour and a bit from now. I'm going to be going straight from here over to there, so hopefully you'll be able to join me over there afterwards as well, because we've got a pretty damn good topic, but I'll talk about that later. So let's dive into our super chats. See what we've got. Hi Andy. Hello Malvedroth. Delighted to chat. If someone were to resist Nurgle's rot long enough, can they turn into a great unclean one, or do they stop at a herald of Nurgle? This is how long is a piece of string? There's as many answers to this as the writers who will tackle it. Broadly speaking, you turn into a plague bearer. You're gonna become that. And if you hold on for longer, it just means you're gonna become pretty disgusting and horrible for far longer before eventually you flip and turn into a demonic entity. It is, loosely speaking, not the route towards becoming a great unclean one through normal processes, but that doesn't mean that one writer couldn't come along and say that's exactly what they think is the process, as Nurgle takes far longer to apparently corrupt this far greater soul, and what comes out at the end of it is something perhaps a little bit more big for good old Papa Nurgle. But broadly speaking, the answer to that one is no. Aleph Flux, thank you very much, appreciated. Had foggy memory that you said Kadai following Azurin's prohibition descent into the mortal plane and Kaitharai rebelled against Law or Raw. Do I remember correctly, or had the four categories of elves? Let me just quickly clarify all of this. Law or Raw, first, what is that? That's LAWhammer, or what's actually found inside Warhammer. Now, LAWhammer has a slightly different version of the background. It's not that it's different, it's just that it's expanded. It takes what's already sitting inside the Warhammer background as it stands, and it just adds extra detail. And in the LAWhammer background, and indeed in a side stream that I have just recorded, it is indeed a little bit broader. There is the Kadai, there is the Kaithari, there's also the Kadai, the Kahado, I can't even, I'm stumbling over my Eltharine, the Kahadahai, the Chaos Gods, and the Yenlai, who are the harmonious, balanced ones, i.e. the ones who stand out of the conflict. So there are four types inside the LAWhammer, but inside the actual rules, you've only really got the Kadai and the Kaithari, as described there, which are the heavenly gods and the underworld gods, and you have the chaos gods, who are separated and obviously gods, and gods that the elves know are there, so they are as much elf gods as anything else, but they're not part of the considered pantheon of the elven deities. And in the LAWhammer version, they are just gods like any of the others and are all lumped together into different groupings. So let me just double check that. I had foggy memory that you said the Kadai followed Azurin's prohibition descent. Yes, they do. And yes, they didn't so much rebel against, the Kaithari didn't rebel against what Azurin prohibited from doing, which was come into the mortal realms. It'd be better to say they disagreed with it, and well, he's Azurin, so they had no choice, so they were kicked out of the mortal realms anyway. And the only way that the gods have any real direct impact now upon the mortal realms is through potential elven avatars, and that's only because Azurin himself allowed that to occur when he inhabited the body of an Ariel. So hopefully that gives at least a bit more extra context there. Oh, Aleph, you've gone wild. Hey, Aleph, thank you very much again. if you can, how would you distinguish Hecartian magic and Hoethian magic? And who else is a major elven god of magic? Lilith. There's quite a bit here to potentially unpack. I'll try to keep it fast because our streams are always... there's a lot of questions to get through, but loosely speaking, for those of you who don't understand, Hecartian is the underworld goddess Hecate, and Hecate is the goddess of dark magic. She took the magic as it was back during the Cataclysm and fashioned it into dark magic to use against the Chaos Gods. And she is the mother of magic for the elves because she gives them the dark magic. As far as the Dark Elves is concerned, she is pretty much the best. Hoeth, by comparison, is the god of wisdom, and wisdom is knowing all things, which includes magic. So Hethian magic, and what is studied in the lore by the lore masters in the White Tower of Safri in Ulthuan, follows a more Hoethian angle, but Lilith is also a goddess of magic too, so there's more to it than simply Hoeth on that side. And then all the other gods, every one of them, involve magic to some degree or another, unless you decide to include Khorne inside the Elven Pantheon. All of them have it. I mean, if you take a look at Ariel and the sorts of Isha-based magic she's working on, Kurnos and how he manifests through Orion, all of them have got magic of a variety of different kinds. The magic of Vol, the smith, they are not just simply, oh, he's a skilled smith, they're using magic too. So pretty much all of them. So if you were working away at building your own elven rules, if you decided that you weren't happy with the elven rules as they stood, you would be well within your remit to take a look at all of those gods and create spells that were absolutely appropriate for them. Having said that, though, Hecate in particular, you're going to be diving deep into dark magic and different strands of dark magic. If you take a look at the background rather than necessarily the spells that you see for the Dark Elves, they have got all manner of generally horrible, generally evil, but not always horrible, not always evil spells that are centered around manipulating dark magic to do a variety of powerful things, many of which involve spirits, and many of which involves demons, many of which involves almost classical spells from the demonology lists or the necromancy lists that you might be surprised to find Dark Elves using. So I would suggest, loosely speaking, Hecate, dark magic, Hoeth, Lilith, high magic, and all of the standard colors as you understand apply to both. So all the gods beyond that are using all of the colors of magic in one way or another to create the outcomes that they're looking for. Vol will be using, for example, Shaman, or will be using Akshwe to empower various artifacts that are created by him. Hey, Aleph! You're carrying on, and a classic. What's your favorite Peel province today? And a fun fact about it. As we have discussed in previous Ask Me Anythings, I don't really have favorite provinces. I do, however, vacillate between having a favorite one some days and not on other days. Today, at the moment, I'm really deep into Middenheim. Now, you might go, Middenheim's not a province, but in Warhammer lore, different parts of the Empire are grand provinces at different times. And for a good chunk of Warhammer lore, Middenheim is its own grand province. And over on the LAWhammer side, we have been building an interesting story with Middenheim. And my interesting fact about Middenheim for the day, what will we go with? I'd like to tie it into what we're doing with LAWhammer just now. Probably that Middenheim has had a long-standing relationship with magic, far longer than, say, for example, the Colleges of Magic and its foundation down in Altdorf, which is only 200 years old. Most of the Empire completely forbid magic. Not so in Middenheim. It has had a guild of magic working on magic and different forms of magic for centuries. And it is, loosely speaking, much more of a magical capital in terms of its age, at least, than Altdorf ever was, where Altdorf had forbidden magic completely, especially because the Sigmarites feared the witches, who were, as far as the Sigmarites were concerned, using the power of chaos. And one should not be using the power of chaos as a witch. That's bad news. So witchery was absolutely illegal in Altdorf for most of its history, except of course that then later, during the time of Magnus the Pious, became the source of magic in the Empire when the colleges of magic were placed there, because Altdorf lies upon a magical confluence. So yeah, that's quite fun. Hey, Ian O'Brien, thanks very much for dropping by. Hey, Andy. Hello. Love your take on headcanon about the Undead Elves. Oh, I'd love a Undead Elf. Ooh. And I feel they're rare. I believe they show up in great numbers in the GG. Remnants of the Ground Kingdoms revived by Noctilus's spell. Okay, so first question, are there undead elves? And the answer to this is yes. But I am going to qualify this. I'm going to qualify this in a variety of ways. Undead come in different forms. We have, for example, the Nagash leaning undead. So this is what Nagash has created using dark magic that he was taught by 3 dark elf sorceresses back in the day, a long time ago. And he manipulated those magics to create a new form of necromancy, which was, broadly speaking, sourced in his fear of death himself. And he found ways to prolong his life eventually into eternity. And he then found ways to manipulate those magics to turn any corpse into, well, an undead corpse, which is good stuff if you're Nagash. And it's quite profoundly different to what the elves do. So there's all of that. That magic is, let's just categorize it as human necromancy. There are, across the Warhammer world, lots of other types of necromancy. We very rarely get any detail about it, but you often get a small scant line that says, oh, and the undead magics of blah, some distant area has its own form. Not attached to Nagash, not attached to what Nagash did, but definitely creating undead stuff. So stuff that is no longer alive as far as normal mortal realms would consider such things, but definitely undead. The elves have got this. The elves have got a variety of spirits, whether it's those that fall down into their underworld, into their screaming hells, where their elven spirits will one day return, or elven spirits that move into the waystones that dot all around the old world and Ulthuan and elsewhere, that are used to channel magic across the world up into the vortice and out of the world back into the realm of chaos, or the realm of the gods, or the whatever else you want to call it, the aether as the elves often use. And those spirits sometimes sit inside way shards that elves carry. Should they die, their spirit goes in there. It sometimes sits in the waystones, and they are almost basically elven ghosts. So there's lots of undead varieties. There's also many stories of the shattered cities that the elves once inhabited that are so massively destroyed by magic that the spirits of the elves that died there haunt there to this day. That, however, stands in contradiction to certain stories that lie elsewhere with elven lore. For example, all elves are doomed to be eaten by Slaanesh. Slaanesh, the chaos god of rapacious excess. And there's a reason for that. Elven souls are unlike any other souls. It's basically the difference between good food, or really well seasoned food, or really bland gruel. Most souls are bland gruel. Elven souls taste like really good food. And Slaanesh, the god of excess, has claimed all of them as hers, stroke his, stroke its. And that god pretty much chases down all elven souls, meaning that any elves who die pretty much are eaten by Slaanesh. And it's awful. Truly, truly awful. So the option for elven ghosts are not that common. In that you always need to have an excuse to have an elven ghost. They don't happen normally. Spirits of those who died in particular fashions that are deeply awful often hang around in areas. But if it's an elven soul, it will normally be eaten. So you need to make an excuse for why it wasn't in any particular old elf city where ghosts still remain. Or the great cliffs that look over it. It's not Harganeth, it's it's one of the Dark Elven cities. I'll look it up later. Where spirits are constantly haunting around the cliffs as they see all the Dark Elf reavers arriving. They're slave ships full of slaves. And those spirits are constantly haunting the area, and they are elven spirits. So there's a bunch of them all over the place. And included right down into Galleon's graveyard, where they're even mentioned that there's elves down there doing ghostly, elfy stuff. Now, you can make excuses for each one. The Galleon graveyard is special. Areas that are so saturated with magic that the demons themselves, when they were looking for the souls, couldn't find the elves as they were dying in the enormous storm of magic, meaning that the spirits are now hanging around in the material plane, having never really reached through to the realm of chaos where the demons are prowling. There's lots of ways we can do that. So none of these are really headcanons. This is just how it works. But actual undead elves, as in an elf who dies and comes back as, say, a vampire or a zombie or some equivalent, doesn't really happen. The bringing back of corpses tends to be a human thing. We get some orcs here, some elves here, some dwarves here. We do get them rarely popping up, but it's not just that we don't have the models for it. It's mostly a human condition because we often look at the Nagash magic, which is largely about manipulating human souls. And your body, the stuff you're made out of, is a part of your soul in the Warhammer world. It's been detailed in many places. A good grounding point for that, if you want to read up on it more, is the Liber Necris, which was a book produced by Black Library. So broadly speaking, you don't normally get undead elves as we understand it. There's tons of elven ghosts all over the place, but they tend to be more lost spirits. Most elven souls, however, if they're not dropped into one of the many spirit repositories that the elves have created, whether that is trees, whether that is stones, whether that's way shards or whatever, their spirits are lost to Slaanesh. And lastly, on the because I do think it's worth popping up that there has been a mention of a lich or a vampire. Elves don't need to do this stuff. It doesn't. You can't turn them into that under normal situations, but they don't need it because they're probably going to live for ever anyway, as effective as that requires a definition. Some books have elves aging in one way, but most of them have them pretty much going on and on and on, and capable of using magics in better ways than turning yourself into a horrific entity without a soul. So yeah, they don't need undeath. They've got things like Marathi, who is eternally perfect, or even the slightly less eternally perfect version that is Hellebrand, but nevertheless going on forever. Malekith, going on forever. The elves just kind of keep on ticking, so the drive towards perfecting themselves with undeath in a way that allows them to live forever is not there. It's a human thing, which is why most of the undead magics tend to be centered around humanity. I hope that gave a fulsome reply for you there. Moving over to Cole Patterson. Hey, if George R. R. Martin were to write a Warhammer novel to give himself another distraction finishing Winter, what would you want it to be about? So, George R. R. Martin, his work is focused around uplifting all of the stories from, let's just say, the British Isles, because it's not just England and it's certainly not just Scotland, although there's lots of stories that have come from Scotland and England that he has pretty much just copy pasted over. And he takes all of the stories that may have taken place over approximately, I don't know, 500 years, and he slams them all together and says they all happen in a single generation. So all of the treachery of 500 years is dropped inside a single generation. And that's quite fun. So what we would be looking for is, what would he do if he took all of those treacherous stories and wrote them a game of houses? So if you're looking at him replicating that, you're probably looking at a story of the Empire, for example, and the various noble bloodlines and their attempt to kill each other in a variety of different ways, almost certainly pushed into those directions by chaos. Having said that, though, that's too bloody obvious. George R. R. Martin, although many will criticize him from one side or another, pretty damn good writer. He could do something new, something interesting, a nice character study in a completely different area. I personally, however, would prefer that he finished Winds of Winter, just because I'd love to see how he's going to pull it all off in a fashion that does what he says he was going to do. My biggest criticism of George R. R. Martin is that he set up a whole load of cool stories and his fans figured it out. So it appears he's decided he's going to write in a different direction so that he's brought something new and original to the table that no one will expect. And that's a fool's game. If you lay all the seeds and your fans figure it out, then congratulate them. Well done, and write the story you were always going to write. He seems to have tied himself up into knots. And I would be afraid that he would do the same thing if he wrote a bunch of Empire books. And that would be, I don't think, great. But I do think the Empire books are the obvious answer. Pyrote! Hello. Thank you very much. Hi, Andy. Hiya. I lost my job. Oh no, and got a better new one. Yay! Now I can throw money at you. Yay! Ansotech. Woo! Again, my question is High Elf slavery. It seems to pop up in the Go Trek Felix novels. It does. And some flavor text, but never again. So are High Elf slavers? Yes. Unless you ignore those sources, then no. So the army books do not portray a High Elf slave market push drive at all. They very much portray them as, broadly speaking, the Kadai leaning sort of good guy elves who sort of live over in Ulthuan, but they're not really good guys because they'll murder anything that disagree with them. They're very haughty, don't you know? Ha ha ha. And they sort of leave it there. But when we look into the deeper lore in general, then yeah, they are not heavy slavers, and the way that they hold their chattel people is a very different to say the Dark Elves, but kinda, yeah, they have got effectively slaves, many of them held in a variety of what we would consider to be utterly inappropriate ways. But you tend to find most writers prefer to portray the High Elves as good guys, and slavery is not seen as a good guy tradition, so most writers ignore it entirely, or even sometimes Games Workshop say, I'd just rather not anymore, let's move on from that. So the answer to this is both yes and no. So if you're sitting there trying to make decisions about how you want to portray your High Elves, take a think of how you think their culture would work. In LAWhammer, in our version, High Elves do indeed have slaves, and those slaves aren't allowed into Ulthuan in the slightest. They only work in and around Lothern and in many of the other port places that they have, but they are other species that they effectively trade like anything else. They are arrogant motherfuckers, and they are more than happy to use other people and do not have any issues at all with effectively owning people. It's horrific, but I think it matches the tone of what the High Elves represent in terms at least of their metaphorical use, where the High Elves are often used almost as a sort of weird extension of the British Empire and that faded empire of glory that has been lost. Whilst the British Empire was responsible for getting rid of much of the slavery in the world, and it was also responsible for the opposite. And the Warhammer world tends to look at the darker side of things, so I often prefer to do that. But it is not a universal thing. In my version, in the LAWhammer side, slavery is only part of the society, and there are those who disagree with it. And the reason for that, again, is because High Elves are deeply political creatures. They don't agree with each other about anything. So it's not in the LAWhammer version that High Elves have slavery. It's that it's yet to be illegal, and there's a very big strong push to make it illegal, but the Phoenix King doesn't have absolute authority overall because the different princedoms have got different rules and different laws that they each follow. So the 10 kingdoms of the elves are not going to be consistent on this. So broadly speaking, if we're going strictly with what's in the books, the answer is both yes and no. And if we go with all of the lore and we presume it's all correct, and our job is to try and synthesize all of that together into one, then the answer is yes, absolutely, because it is in multiple sources, but generally small drop to size. Hopefully that helps. Let's move down to Ricky Chapman. Hi, Ricky, and thank you very much. Our players are attempting to tame a Jabberslide. Excuse me, just give me a moment to take that in. Okay, I'm back. Okay, my players are attempting to tame a Jabberslide for a mount. Any advice for them? They're a Druki Corsair, a Tong Raider, a Tomb Queen, and a very, very mad Scaven Pathmaster. All right, so if you don't know out there, Jabberslides make you go mad. I would be absolutely delighted if I was a GM who had players who were trying to do this, because it's probably not going to work. it isn't impossible. There's a variety of ways that you can, I'm not going to use the word tame really, but control beasts. Beastmen are known for it. Jabberlides, after all, are a part of their army list. And they can be driven forward towards the enemy by the beastmen armies. But Jabberlides, they make you go mad. If you're trying to make it a mount, then you are constantly throwing yourself into a position where you're going to have to go mad. So they've got a hard job. One, they've got to figure out how they control this bounding entity that is not going to be particularly easy to ride in the first place. Second, they're going to have to come up with a method to control the madness that is constantly secreted by this creature, which means that they're going to have to find a way to make themselves immune. If they don't, they're going to go mad. The most obvious route is amber magic. Amber magic will allow you to gain a certain amount of at least direction for the creature, and I would suggest that if any of your characters have got amber magic, they're in a good place. If they don't, I would probably suggest that most of their attempts are going to fail. And that's good, because not all stories end with success. If they desperately want to do something that's impossible, that's cool. They can push and fail. That's a good story sometimes, because they're in their hubris, they thought they could do the thing that they actually can't. But if they have amber magic, they're at least on the right direction, and then finding a method to make themselves immune to the madness. And that depends on how you want to have your Jabberlides spit out all those horrible nastiness that causes everyone to go literally insane in its presence. And that literal insanity, I think, might actually be their biggest hurdle. Because, hey, you're going to have to be insane to attempt it. They clearly are. They get close. They go insanier. And then even more insanier. So maybe they just keep on pushing. And yeah, there will be many a story of the idiots who attempted to try and tame the Jabberlides and just how mad they went and how poorly it was, at least as a plan, conceived. Having said that, though, I see no reason why people with the correct skills and the correct intelligence and the correct magic couldn't make this happen. And I would suggest that amber magic's your best route through towards it. I'm not sure if that helped at all, but hey, let's hope. Brock 6000, thank you very much. Loved the Hellspit stream. Yeah, it was a good one. We've had a little bit of a break over in Lower Beards. A mixture of there are some issues over in Sotek's side, some issues over on my side. I'm really looking forward to getting back to the Lower Beard goodness with Gorbar at Ironclaw tomorrow. That will be at 4 p.m. UK time. And Hellspit was one of our previous streams that we just did over in Lower Beards, and it was bloody marvelous. It's such a fascinating location. I think it would make a great roleplay location. If I was building a Scaven book, I would really consider citing it there as a good example of something that's quite different for a roleplay example. Anyway, moving on. It inspired me to design a Euro-style board game based on it. Oh, awesome. Okay, I've just taking that in. That would be cool. Right now, it's all kinds of a mix of Lords of Waterdeep. Great. Bears vs. Babies. Also great. Thanks for the inspiration, Andy. Oh, man, Brock, that would be cool. As I said at the beginning of the stream, we are getting all of our games that we had to put into storage when our house was flooded back into the house. And there's, I think, at least 300, maybe 400 of them coming in this batch. And we're obviously having some difficulty fitting it into our house, but it's super, super cool to have them back because I'm a big game player and also a game designer. So super delighted to hear that. I'm a big fan of Lords of Waterdeep in particular. I played that to death for quite some time, very neatly designed, and I also kind of like it. It's based on a map. It's one of Mike Shea's map. If you know Mike, he came on to Inside the Rookery some time ago, and he and I chatted maps along with Mark Gibbons. It was a good time. I recommend you go watch that stream if you haven't done so already. You can find that over on Inside Rookery Publications YouTube channels, and indeed we're going to be popping over there at the end of this discussion, because at the end of this discussion I'm going to be moving into a stream over on the Rookery side with Mark Gibbons, Andy Leask and Lindsay Law, That's my wife. And we're going to be discussing using real world inspiration for your fantasy games, how that sometimes works and how that sometimes doesn't. Basically, there's probably going to be a good bit of Warhammer chat in there, because the Warhammer world has made a lot of very good uses of real world cultures and also a lot of very bad uses of real world culture. So we're going to be doing that at 7 p.m, 45 minutes from now. I best press on because we only have 45 minutes till that. So let's move on to the next question. Biofoot. How many Gil's unit of measurement are in a kiloliter unit of measurement? Literally no idea. I presume you know, or you wouldn't ask. No idea. I don't use kiloliters when I'm writing for Warhammer, for example, because neither do they. So, yen, given it's a fantasy world and we're using our real world to influence it, we can just make it up. I honestly have no idea. I'm actually going to check it up because it bugs me. Gil Unit of Measurement. I've only ever used Gil. It's a quarter of a pint. Ah, and it's spelled Gill. Huh. It's a teacup's worth. I've learned something new there. I didn't know that. I feel like an idiot because it's something that I should know. A teacup's unit of volume equal to a quarter of a pint. There you go. I have learned something. Thank you very much, Biofoot. Appreciated. I should use that. That would be used in the Warhammer world. God damn it. So I'll be using that one more often. I can't believe I didn't know that. I do love learning new things. Luigi Super. Thank you very much. Hi, Andy. Hi. I was in a weird debate. Uh-oh. Long story short, who would you say is a more benign ruler? Ariel or King Luen? And who would be less racist? Benign. Benign. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take a dictionary definition of benign rather than my own personal head definition. So mild, gentle disposition. Yeah, so that's interesting. Showing kindness and gentleness. Right, so I don't know if you've watched our Ariel stream, but Ariel is a particularly warlike individual for an Everqueen who is meant to be representing a significantly less warlike deity. Nevertheless, she is nowhere near good old Grail Knight King Luen in terms of, I mean, is she? I would say on balance that Ariel is more benign in terms of the levels of benign, but is not a benign ruler as Everqueen over in Avalorn with the High Elves. King Luen Leoncoeur with Bretonnia is definitely not a benign ruler either. Bretonnia as a whole is not the best place to live. It's a significantly better place than it used to be in some older editions, but even with its most recent edition inside, say, the Old World, it's still not a great place. As to who would be less racist, assuming we're using that word to mean who would be the... I mean, racism amongst elves is completely different to racism amongst humans, because it's with racism with elves would be dark elves, wood elves, et al. Racism for King Luen would be amongst humanity. I presume you're meaning more speciesist, as in wouldn't be pleased to have other species. Ariel has no other species, intelligent species beyond the spirits of the wood within her realm. King Luen does. Ariel is far more speciesist, if you want to view it in that fashion, because none are allowed within her kingdom. They're just not allowed. It's elves only in Avalorn, where at least in Bretonnia you get all manner of other species. There's elves who pass through there, there's dwarves, there's even gnomes. One of the most famous gnomes ever created for Warhammer is indeed a Bretonian. So broadly speaking, on one side benign, probably Ariel, but boy, she's not a benign ruler. And on the other side, King Luen is probably the less racist of the two. I hope that helps your question. That was an interesting one. Quinn, could the Moon Empress survive walking through the Silver Flame? Related, what would you do if a PC tried walking through the flame? So, for the first part, that depends entirely on whether you believe that silver flame that's in Middenheim, burning away, placed there by Ulrich, according to the myths, is related to Mansleep. And if it is in your version and the icy magics that are lacing through that flame and various other entities related to the moon are all connected, then the Moon Empress very well may survive that. It depends on whether you tie them together. If you don't, then the Moon Empress might look at it and say, no, this is God stuff that's going to kill me. I don't think that would be a wise idea. The answer to the first part of this is it could go either way. The second part, though, I've actually done. And I have had PCs die in the Silver Flame because they were foolish enough to fall into it or go into it. I've had PCs survive it. I have also had a PC, much like Magnus the Pious, who passed through the Silver Flame, or before him, Sigmar Heldenhammer, who passed through the Silver Flame, encounter something within it. And I think that makes for a rather interesting story, and you certainly could do that if you wanted to. Loosely, if you're going with the established lore, if you step into the Silver Flame, you're dead. You're gone. Now, you could say, for example, that you pass into the sacred hunting grounds of Ulrich. Perhaps this is a way to just pass into that afterlife. Or you just freeze to death and are pretty much gone. Evaporated, so to speak. You could do that also. You could have entering a gateway into somewhere else. Perhaps this flame is something different. There's lots of stories you can tell with a place like that. But broadly speaking, you have to be careful, because if you have somebody survive that, then that figure will become a core figure for the Empire for the rest of its life. Only 2 have ever survived that flame, according to the myths as they currently stand. And that's Magnus the Pious and Sigmar Heldenhammer. So if someone else is to pass through there and to presumably confront Ulrich or some equivalent and survive, they are going to become chosen and favored in a fashion that means that, oof, you've changed your game. So if you do that, be aware of the consequences. But ultimately, role-playing games are all about telling the unique and interesting stories of the world in which you play. And many people will only play their campaign maybe once or twice in their life. So why not tell that super epic, super cool story? There is no reason not to. Do it. Have fun with it. Go wild. In many respects, that's what LAWhammer is. LAWhammer is not the game that most people play when they play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Most people, when they play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, play a relatively grounded game of various, often very unimportant characters getting into scrapes, realizing that most of the nobility are corrupt or fall into chaos and everything is broken, and they're the only ones that have any real chance of making a difference. They try to make a difference, they get vilified for doing so, and escape as outlaws, presumably, to move on to their next adventure, scraping together some form of a living in a horrible world. That's not what we're doing with LAWhammer. Instead, we're telling a tale of what would happen if we had a bunch of guys who become relatively epic heroes, because Warhammer World has epic heroes all over the place. What if they got into scrapes with people like Gotrek and Felix? What if they met the Emperor? What if they met these great famous characters? In LAWhammer, that is it. One of our characters, not that it's much of a spoiler, is multiple thousands years old. Not that she was aware, well, she was. Not that anyone else was aware of that, but we reveal that almost at the beginning of the stream. But she's still a little baby nobody, because that's kind of the fun of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. You start small and build up big. And it's the story of what can create those heroes. And our Enemy Within campaign is that. And I'd suggest, possibly, that's what you should do. Why not? It makes for fun. LAWhammer, who is the most powerful human wizard? I'd assume Volans historically, but not sure about present. Nagash. Everyone forgets Nagash. They always go, but he's not, but he is. He's human. Nagash is human. And he, as it currently stands, is almost certainly the most powerful human wizard. He hasn't done what the vast majority of, say, Chaos Sorcerers, people always forget Chaos Sorcerers as well, who are almost certainly significantly more powerful than your average Empire wizard. But Nagash, he's right up there. It would be unfair to include vampires in this list, so we can dump our Manfreds, et al, or whatever Neferata did. But yeah, Nagash. I'm going through everything, trying to come up with an alternative. I don't think there is one. Volans, when he arrived at the Colleges of Magic, was already a superlative wizard and significantly beyond pretty much anything the Colleges of Magic currently turn out, because he could channel multiple winds. And he was made the very first Supreme Patriarch, and he focused on a single wind, which was Heish, the most difficult wind to channel, and he only used that for the rest of his life if we go by the standard background. And that means that Volans is way up there, but Nagash is many multiple orders above that. He's effectively a god. So as unexpected as that is as an answer, it's almost certainly going to be Nagash. Right, let's pop down to Denis, perhaps? I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. Who is Scaldor, and why is Thorgrim's armor named after him? Literally no idea. I was building a Thorgrim about... how long ago was that? About 2 years ago, because I was intending on using him in one of my parts, and the armor... I wrote a story for my own one. I'm just going to double check that I've not missed something, because I don't like to say a thing and get it wrong. But I'm pretty sure it is... Yeah, it's not given any extra detail there either. I'm just confirming that I'm not wrong. I'm pretty sure we have nothing on it. If I'm wrong, someone please do drop into the comments and tell me. But I'm pretty sure, because when I last was building my own one, oh, the page just crashes. I'm trying to look at it. Let's just double check here as well, because there's more than one place I've got. I'm just checking through my own notes for the things that I was building now. Yeah, I've got nothing there either. Okay, so basically, as far as I recall, I don't know, which is really annoying. Scaldor as a name is not your typical dwarf king name. And I was sitting there having a little think about myself when I was building my version of it, because I wanted to build a story for the Armor of Scaldor for my own game. I eventually decided that it wasn't the obvious choice, which was it was the armor of one of his ancestors. Absolutely the obvious choice, and if you want it to be that, I don't think you would be wrong in doing so. But the name Scaldor just, for me, didn't feel quite original dwarfy enough. There was just too much of the skull, which was almost a cheer. It was almost a celebration of something. Scaldor! It was almost armor that was suggesting something that was worthwhile of praise. So I was going to build a story around that idea, but my answer is I actually don't know. So whoever wrote to that particular point, and I think that was first all the way back in the 4th edition army list, so it's been kicking around for a long time. I need to double check if that was the first iteration. I wasn't reading that when I was reading the later 7th and 8th stuff, so yeah, I'm pretty sure it's been going for ages, but I don't know. There might be another reference to it somewhere else. If anybody does know, that would be pretty much bloody marvelous, because I always like knowing those little snippets of lore that I'm not aware of, but I don't think that one has ever been, at least so far, answered. Watchdog 3079. How terrifying would a necro... Oh, here we go. A boromancy if it was codified in game, either in the war game or in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. How terrifying would it be? It would be pretty freaking terrifying, I think, Watchdog. No other way of putting it. But would I want to? Give me a moment. See, whenever questions like this come up, my first thought is, and I'm going to write a note to myself here, is to make it. Because, you know, if no one else has, why don't I? I think, to keep the answer in this one short, the Watchdog, it could be pretty damn terrifying. It'd be a really fun thing to do, to twist how necromancy could be used in that way. So my answer would be pretty decent, and you've inspired me to consider actually making it. At the moment, about to finish an edit on a piece that Lindsay has done for the goddess Cleo. So we're going to be releasing a little expansion for Cleo over in LAWhammer. That was a goddess that's been added in a variety of books. I used it a chunk when I was writing the Tome of Salvation, for example. And she's written some really cool, nice bits. I'm about to do the edit on that. So for I might add that onto my list of things to do, 'cause it's pretty cool. Brian Anderson, do you think GW is trying to replace Warhammer 4th with the old world RPG? So first, it's not GW. The game is produced by Cubicle 7. And are they trying to replace it? I mean, maybe if it's a success and it sells far more than 4th edition, sure. If it doesn't and 4th edition keeps on selling, they'll make a 5th edition and they'll just move on to the next one. It's two different settings. When the old world got released by Games Workshop, it created a new license, an entirely new game that could be made, which would be for the new setting that they were building in the old world approximately 250 years earlier than the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition game. So Cubicle 7, being in the roleplay wing with Games Workshop, presumably picked up that license and they're making a new game for it. And they decided to create an entirely new system to support that. Now, does that mean they're trying to replace it? I mean, possibly. Does that mean that they're just trying to move on from the old game? Maybe. Does that mean that they're wanting this one to be a success? Well, of course they do. But I don't think necessarily they're ever going to replace it per se, because it's got players. And regardless of whether people are selling a game or not, people keep on playing. In fact, Warhammer in particular is famous for this. When Warhammer 1st edition no longer had a publisher, the game just kept on going and people were churning out new material for it until the almost desperate desire for 2nd edition was fulfilled by Games Workshop itself with Black Industries, and the 2nd edition was released. And when the 3rd edition came along and made an entirely new rule set, 2nd edition, if anything, became bigger. People were desperate for more 2nd edition stuff and created yet more fan material, meaning that when we came along and did the 4th edition, we went back to the 2nd edition again and gave people what they wanted, because why not? Mixed with 1st edition stuff and so on. It's good. So I don't think they're necessarily trying to replace it, Brian. It's quite clear that they're continuing to do releases for both games, or at least planning to do so. Cubicle 7 is a very small studio, so their release schedules tend to be quite slow. So I can't expect that it would be the death knell unless Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4 just stops selling completely. Okay, Musbran. What are the actual average heights of Scaven clan rats and storm vermin when they aren't hunched over? Vermintide, Reddit, 4th edition, and Google have all left me answerless, so I will ask LAWhammer. So this is actually kind of answered best when you look at the models and the art, because it does answer it quite well. If I were to stand up, which I mean I could do, I'm going to stand up here, be a big chest. Skaven generally model wise, you've got your average human about this big. This Skaven come up to just about chest height when they're hunched over. And that is their natural way of standing. Some Skaven, especially those that are a bit more muscled, have a stronger stance, a slightly more upright stance. And this is quite common for things like storm vermin in particular. The clan rats are often more hunched over, used to scrabbling, sometimes running on all fours, where the storm vermin are more used to dominating the space that they're in, standing up more firmly. And the storm vermin generally depict around about the 6 foot area, assuming that we're using Imperial. If we're not, that's about what, 185, I guess. I haven't done a conversion for a while, so let me just double check that just to make sure. It's about 183. I was close enough. So about 185 centimeters, about 6 foot. And a clan rat that uncurls itself will be sitting about the height of a man, because the Skaven are a parody of humanity. So the answer to this is, broadly speaking, they're the height of humans. But some of them are a bit shorter, many of them are much shorter, and there's a reason for that also, because if we go with the official myths, they're not just born of human, assuming they were ever born of human at all, if the myths are true, but also dwarf, meaning that the average height would probably be closer to the 5 foot area rather than the 6 foot area when uncurled. But with storm vermin et al., they're going to be sometimes reaching all the way up to around about 7 foot as well, but some humans are doing the same, particularly when you look at the craziness of the Warhammer world, where you sometimes get real giant humans wandering around almost commonly for some of the different ethnicities and some of the different races of humanity that you'll find in the Warhammer world. So broadly speaking, there is no consistent definite this is how big they are, because all Skaven are different and they have all manner of different breeds, types, clans, the lot of them, all of whom have different sizes. And much like the real world, where we all have different sizes. For example, the Dutch are the tallest people in the world. Scottish people, where I'm from, are also relatively tall. Other peoples from other parts of the world are on average shorter. Scaven are the same, but on average, use human heights if you wish to do so. But remember, Warhammer dials everything up to 11, so getting bigger than that is very, very common. Hopefully that helps. I have lost where my mouse is, so I can't move to my next question. There it is. Total Warrior, are there any plans for Lorebeards to cover all of the different gods in the Warhammer world? We are slowly but surely working through many of them. I wouldn't say that we have plans to do all of them per se, but we will keep on offering them up for votes every once in a while, and if you choose them, we will cover them. We rarely fix our topics unless there's something that is important for the day. For example, if there's a new release for the old world or there's a new release for Total War, we'll often focus on whatever it is that they are focusing on. And for example, Decala is going to be coming very soon over on the Total War front. So we haven't really got plans for it. We rarely plan more than 2 or 3 episodes ahead. But there is definitely a desire to do them all. After all, there is a lot of them, but we only do Lorebeards once a week. And that means we only have approximately, given that we miss them every once in a while, about 45 topics we can cover a year. And when you say that, there's more than 45 gods in the Warhammer world, and we don't just focus on gods. So we will get to a lot of them, but the chances of us getting to all of them in a short time scale is pretty small. So whenever you see us do a vote and there's a god that you would like to see, drop it and tell us. Or alternatively, if there's a particular topic you're very keen to see pop up, just tell us, and we'll probably at one point go, oh yeah, that one was asked for a lot. Let's put that on a next Lorebeards episode. I particularly enjoy talking about the gods. I've written loads about them for various games, so as far as I'm concerned, well worth my time. Mayo1570, what time are we at? Make sure I don't fall behind. How far? Oh no, we've got a fair chunk there. I'll make sure that I speed up a little. Does Warhammer have a concept of anti-magic? More specifically, something, someone, or a method that negates or is anathema to the winds of magic? Yes, absolutely. And it's obsidian. Obsidian is volcanic glass, if you didn't know. And obsidian is used in a variety of anti-magical ways in Warhammer. There's all manner of artifacts like the talisman obsidian, a sword of obsidian or whatever, that are effectively the destroyer sword, which is made of obsidian. And it is deeply antithetical to magic. If you get yourself obsidian manacles, the wizard can no longer cast their spells because they have obsidian on them. They're completely screwed. So yes, obsidian is specifically anti-magic. Now, when we come over to is there some method or person or whatever that's anti-magic, then it gets a little bit more muddy. The dwarves are often described as being anti-magic because the dwarves themselves can't see the winds of magic. They're incapable of using the winds of magic unless you go with the most recent dwarf rules where apparently some of them can see the winds of magic. That's a new thing. But normally they can't, and they are antithetical to magic, and if you force magic through them, their bodies rebel and they turn to stone, because that's a thing. It's been a Chaos Dwarf thing for some time, as they almost force magic through themselves because they are different, blessed by their god Hashut, mutated into something slightly different to the standard dwarf norm. You could claim that dwarves are anti-magical, and you wouldn't be incorrect. They can all stop spells simply by being there and going, yup, nope, no spell here, ho ho ho. That's been the case since Warhammer 4th edition, but there's not really a species that has, say, for example, that same sort of feel as like a null or a blank or some equivalent in 40k, where they are massively anti-psychic. You don't really have an equivalent that's worth mentioning in Warhammer, although there's lots of individuals who are anti-magical. Collars of Khorne, for example, that Khorne have around their neck, deeply anti-magical and dispel magic that automatically merely by their existence. A lot of those, though, very probably are using obsidian. Obsidian is the core anti-magical component in the material realms. So, yes is the answer. Exaggerated swagger. Hiya, hiya. As of the Brytonian women can be nice. Correct. Any clue as to how to integrate new lore in an ongoing 4E game? Got a quest night player returning home. You've got many options. One option is to say that things have changed. That back in the old world, it was this way, and because of successive kings, dukes, whatever, that is no longer the case. I call bullshit to that as a plan. I wouldn't do it, but you could if you wanted to, and I'd like to be fulsome with my answer. I think far more realistically, I would just say that women can be knights. It's nice and easy. The blessing of the lady does not just go to men, it goes to women also, and if women want to go pursue the grail, they can do so. It's up to you whether you think that that is something that happens often, infrequently, only sometimes. The impact of that on stories like Repant's the Lioness is nowhere near as significant as some people would like to pretend it is. Repant's is just the best example of it. I think there are all manner of different ways that you can integrate it without it having any major impact. However, if your world has already established that women can never be knights, and now you want to change that, then it's not a concern for how do you incorporate the new version into your world and then spin a story and make sense of it. It's a conversation with your players. You sit down with your players and say, I've read the new lore, I prefer it. So from now on, we'll just assume that was always the case. And everyone will go, yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Because it's easier doing it that way than trying to make some weird convoluted story to say, and suddenly the lady is accepting women doing this and stuff. I wouldn't bother with that. I'd just speak to the players, sit down with them, have a mature conversation and say, this is a far cooler way of doing the background. We can get some really cool characters out of this. So let's do this too. It's going to create some really interesting stories where there are certain families who need the women to not be running off and playing games of questy knightiness or whatever, because we need to continue the family line, but they're going off along with the book. It causes problems, and conflict creates cool stories. Women becoming knights makes for better stories in Bretonnia. So I think it works really well. There's going to be people who hate it. There's going to be people who like it. There's going to be people who think that women should stay at home because people are terrible that way sometimes. And I think that makes for some really good stories. So I'd like to include that, but it's up to you what you want to do with your group. Personally, if I was just copy pasting that bit of lore in, I would just say, hey, let's sit down and discuss how we want to do that. Ask your players. They'll probably come up with better ideas than you might expect. Okay, let me just scroll down here. And we go, hey, Barn from Bastard. Hello, Andy. Hello. How would you imagine tooth values for orcs? Such as how does an orc value their teeth compared to humans? Or saurs, trolls, minotaurs. Essentially, a small tooth economy breakdown. So, I've done this. The things I've done for my games in the past. I played an orc game, this was a while ago. 25 years ago? Maybe longer. It was a long time ago. Orc teeth were indeed the currency that I was using, and I even had an exchange rate for teeth through to gold and teeth through to silver et al. The orcs are, contrary to many of their depictions, more civilized in many places than many people realize. Now, we covered this when we did, was it the Blackcraft Fortress? I forget its name, it's off the top of my head. I've lost it. I'm not even going to try to remember right now because my brain is made of Swiss cheese today. I had a very poor sleep last night. But we've covered this already in one of our streams when we discussed it's really annoying me now. What's the name of that fortress? Blackcrag? No. Anyway, doesn't matter. The orcs there have gathered a massive civilization, trade not just in gold and silver, but in teeth also. And broadly speaking, my conversion rate was size matters. That was it. The bigger the teeth, the more valuable they were. And it wasn't much more complicated than that. Some particularly cagey orc merchants were known for weighing the teeth. So it was mass. Others were much more interested in size. Look at this giant thing. I should be able to get that for this, surely. Other orcs were cheaty motherfuckers, and they would literally gild their teeth with metal to make them heavier. So if anyone weighed them, they would look better, particularly people who'd had tusks that had been cut off, and they'd put metal bits on the top of them. And other canny merchants would come along and go, nope, and try to break the bits off. And they'd be like, yo, none of that. And squabbles and animosity would inevitably develop from there. But broadly speaking, size matters, but there is always a gentle push towards orc teeth being the bestest. So when it came to breaking the difference between one group and another, the more orc teeth, the better. That's how I did my small tooth economy. You might prefer to do it a different way, because there is obviously no correct way to do it, because it's not really been dictated. Now, let me find where I was. Right here. Oh, you popping right in again. Hello. Also, what would be a dwarf's response to an Empire citizen telling them Skaven aren't real, they're just beastmen? Depends on the dwarfs. Many dwarfs don't know about the Skaven at all. The population of dwarves in the Empire, for example, are broadly unaware of the Skaven. It's not a commonly known thing, in the same way that it's not commonly known that Chaos Dwarves exist or Dark Elves exist. They are something that is far and distant from their daily lives. However, if you come from one of the Carracks, one of the big mountain fortresses that are being assailed by Skaven in the Under world, right at the bottom of the roots of your cities, then it's a very real, obvious concern. But they are beastmen. And they are. And you would just probably view it as the Umgi being idiots. You might even go, yeah, fair enough, the beastmen of the forest and the beastmen of the cities. Yeah, sure. It's easy for us to categorize them as separate entities because they are in the rules. But for people who live in that world, really, what's the difference between one animal creature and the next animal creature and the next one? Now, we know there's deep cultural differences. And the dwarves know that they are the enemy from below and they are the rats that come up from underneath. But out in the wild, it's the wild animals that are attacking instead. The sheep, the boar, the ram, whatever else it might be, the beastmen that are coming in. It's not really that much different. As much as we might go, it's obviously different because we know everything because we read about it. For the people in the world, it isn't. Many dwarves don't really care what humans think. Most don't. So when them saying that's just a beastman, isn't it? They probably go, yeah, well, in your tongue, yeah, that might be the case. But from their tongue, they have a special world for the rat beastmen that come from below. It's not a great stretch that they just wouldn't care, or alternatively would agree. It's a complicated affair. Each dwarf will have their own views, and whilst we have a very obvious big overall god view where we can say it's definitely Skaven, it's definitely beastmen, for the people who are there, there's multiple breeds of gore, all different types, and there's no reason that Skaven can't be included in that by many people, and indeed they are. So I'm not too worried about that one as a setup, although I think some dwarves would laugh in their face. Pyrote, I forgot to ask how excited you are with Kithy announced. We are certainly getting a full Kislev range. How, given much, how is inspired by your work? Yeah, so the second Kislev comes out, I'm going to be a freaking delighted. I did so much work in Kislev, but I was standing on the shoulders of giants. It wasn't just me that built it. Now, the Kislev that I was responsible for building, I did all the career work, I did all the magic work, I created the hags, I created the new version of the Ice Court and built them in the new way that they are. The Ice Witches and Ice Wizards and the Ice Shamans that came before were always there. There have been male Ice Wizards in the background before. Gavthorpe completely changed how Kislev was when he did his army list, and then I used Gavthorpe stuff, added to that. I used the stuff from Dan Adnett that he had done in Riders of the Dead, added to that. I was only one author on that book. I was part of a team with Graham McNeil and with, oh God, I'm going to embarrass myself not remembering it, Steve Darlington and David Cross. Oh, almost forgot that. So I did all the rules and I made all the crunch work and I built all of the structures while they did things like build Kislev City or build Prague or write an adventure or whatever. But we were in constant communication, building up different versions of it. But am I excited? Frickin' hell yes I am. The Singemeister. Could trees in the Infinite steal Galmaraz? Anyone could steal Galmaraz. Galmaraz is just a hammer that's sitting inside Aldorf. Anyone could give it a go, and sure, I imagine you could build a good story for Trace in the Infinite to do that one, Singemeister. I'm conversant that we're almost at 10-2. I might have to speed up. Let's how many? I don't have too many left. I can zoom through these, so I'm going to start speeding up now. Hendrik, how do you handle stun condition versus low-level NPC? They can get stuck in it for multiple rounds without resolve. Should NPCs have resolve? Yes, they should. If you're using resolve, I don't use resolve. So that's my first thing. I don't use resolve. I don't use... So this is in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. You've got yourself a bunch of meta currencies, as they're often called. These are points that you can use to do different things with. And resolve allows you to ignore a stun. I rewrote it. That's how I handle it. I never like multiple meta currencies. I would prefer just having fate points, and they translate into having so much luck with your fortune points, and you can use fortune points to ignore stun conditions. I just do it that way, which means because it's tied to just fate points, you no longer need to worry about NPCs having that stuff, because very few NPCs have luck as a talent. Meaning that very few of them will have it. So if they don't have the necessary talent to ignore stun, like an Iron Jaw or something like that, then it's not an issue in general for play. So I'm fine with stun conditions. I think they're good. They don't come out all that often, but it is possible to get stuck in them, which is super unfun for certain characters. So my advice is either A, just run it as is and be aware combat sucks and your players just should probably avoid it. That's one resolution. Or alternatively, give some of your NPCs resolve it if it's something that pops up a lot. I prefer not to. I've got rid of those meta currencies entirely because the resolve, it was just an extra thing to track at the table and life was too short. That might not be the answer you want to hear though. Forest Hammer, if you had the okay to, how would you bring the Norse dwarves to the lore without changing the outcome? I'm not sure what you mean by without changing the outcome there, but I would just write a book about them. That would be it. It would be an entire book about the unique group of dwarves that are at the north of the World's Edge Mountains, spreading into Norska, and the culture that they have and the impact of that culture. I'd be looking for places like Sharktracken over in the edge of whatever it's called. I'd be looking at the dwarf ports there. I'd be looking to build the Norse Navy that they have, because they have one, and showing how that's different. I'd be looking at their cultural differences between the primary Carracks and what they're like, talking about their berserkers and what they're like, talking about how their holds are different, and how they deal with the far closer influence of chaos. I would also look to show how they had influence on the Norse tribes around them and what that influence was in terms of language, in terms of trade, in terms of their goods and what they work with. And I would probably have a nice wee adventure to show how the Norse are different to other dwarves, how their honor systems are different to other dwarves. I would probably have a section about their oaths and their runes, so the oaths that Norse dwarves swear that are different to the oaths from the Carracks, and also the runes that they have that are unique to the north, that are very different to what comes from the south, specifically designed for the way they live. I would also look to create some new shit that had never been seen before, some new creatures that they themselves are working against, some new things that they use, a new career that is entirely unique and interesting for them. Broadly speaking, I would look to add depth to their culture, because as it stands, their culture is almost empty beyond their kind of dwarf Vikings, aren't they? So I'd look to try and build that. Theo or Theo Benora, provocative take. Sigmar makes the world smaller. I kind of agree. Yeah, it's not that provocative. I kind of agree. Given the time, I have like 4 or 5 minutes left. I won't go into this one. If we're going to pick it up, maybe dive into LAWhammer Discord and we can maybe have a discussion or something. Although I'll be moving into a stream right after this one. On that, I better try to remember how the hell you move people from Twitch over to another Twitch channel. I always forget how to do that. If someone can remind me, if Hawk's out there, in fact, Hawk, you know how to do that, don't you? Can you move people at the end of the stream over to the Rookery Publications one? That'd be great if you're out there. Anyway, so I sort of agree, and the best way you can actually see that is if you take a look at the size of the Empire inside the total war map, and how much space it dominates this old world section for how much size it actually has in the real old world, which is far, far smaller. Zakar, how to play a Hethian. Could you have a veteran dog of war who is open-minded? Yes, you could. From seeing too much of the world? Yes. Maybe having a mix of world superstitions. Yeah, I think the big one, given, again, I'm concerned about the time here. I would say Myrmidia. Get Myrmidia sorted in your head. Myrmidia is the core goddess of Tilia, but all the classical goddesses and gods are very common down there. Your Mors, your Solkans, your Canes, they're all down there doing stuff with Shalia et al. But Myrmidia is the biggest and most important goddess down there. So study up on Myrmidia and then create characters around that, probably because there's not been a lot written about Tilion, drawing on maybe the Dogs of War stuff, but also maybe just taking a look into Renaissance Italy and taking things that you really like from that. And thanks very much for confirming what I need to write there, Hawk. I'll just write it now so that I've got it written. Publications. I'll assume that I can do the raid after, and I'm sure that'll work. Right, let's zip through the last of our questions before we have to bring it to a halt. Daniel Lysen, difficult to tell. Why curling eyes are completely back? Also, Vermintide stream when? So, elven eyes take all manner of different colors. They are not like human eyes. They often don't have, in fact, if we go by the standard version, they do not have pupils or irises at all. They are one solid color, possibly with flecks of other colors, or starbursts of other colors, or all manner of different things. Elf eyes are freaking weird, but some various writers have forgotten this. To a degree, I ran with that for LAWhammer, and I had our elven character start with what appeared to be human eyes, but as we found out much later in the streams, she'd had a spell cast on her, and her actual eyes were pure misty grey. So yeah, that's just what elf eyes are like. And moving down, was reading Tribes and Tribulations. Yep, found the Stone Snakes tribe who free Chaos Dwarf slaves and had a question. If a dwarf who was captured by Chaos Dwarves and was rescued by orcs, would they take the Slayer Oath? Oh, frickin' right they would, Ricky. Imagine being rescued by orcs. Holy crap. It would be freaking hilarious. Although it's very likely that they're just being enslaved by the orcs. But no, that's not going to go down very well. Oh, look at my time. I've got to run on. Sorry, Ricky, I'm going to move on quickly. Bartkey, hi, Andy. Seems first children of an Arian were born before he drew the sword. Yes. Does this mean that they are not tainted? No. And that the whole line shouldn't be? No. Just in the Malekith side? No. No, the line drawing the sword tainted his entire blood, living, connected, before, after, whatever, screwed. He was told not to do this by so many people because of the curse that would be laid upon him that sat upon that blade. It's also worth noting that the curse of Cain is probably not the correct name for it. The curse should probably be the curse of Vol, because after all, it was Vol that probably made that blade, and he cursed Cain for all the horrible things that Cain had done to him. And whoever bears that sword is kind of screwed, and screws everything connected to him, including the children that were born before you drew that blade. So I'm sorry to say the curse of Cain is not only with Malekith. Third Tom thoughts. Oh, just worth also noting, that means every single ever queen, all of them have the curse of Cain. All of them. Catherine's top 3 personality trait driving motive. So I presume we mean Zarina Catherine. Oh, she is very much top 3. I don't have a lot of time. I like to think on these things. She's core for Kislev, holding her court. She wants to keep everything together. She wants to preserve her father's legacy. She is a complicated character who feels that she has to keep herself aloof and separate from everybody else, lest they think that they can impinge upon her authority. Her authority is everything, and it's weak and it's fragile, like the very ice that she focuses on. She is a stern character, but she's also brittle. She's extraordinarily powerful, but at the same time, it means very little to a knife in the back. Her top 3 personality traits, though, and her driving motives are very much keeping Kislev clean and pure from all of the corruption that's coming in from the outside, and that also includes the corruption within her court. She believes she's the only one who can properly do it, and that's probably not true. 13th Hussar are men and women equal in admittance and privileges and duties in the Imperial Colleges of Magic. The only 2 I know of are Elspeth and Sienna. Yes, there's freaking loads of them. Many of the colleges are dominated by women. For example, let's just go to the Jade College. The Jade College has, in general, more women than it has men, and is indeed led by a matriarch. Matriarch Grumfeld, Dr. Grumfeld. Yes, they are absolutely equal in all ways. This spark of magic comes to people, not to individual genders or sexes. Whoa, Oh, that was really close. We're moving up to the hour, and I have just hit the last of the super chats. I really hope I didn't miss any, because I ran through that very quickly at the end. I'd like to say thanks very much. I'm about to move over to Rookery Publications, where we're going to be discussing using real life things to create your fantasy worlds. You know, like maybe using Egypt to create Nehekara. And we're going to be discussing that with Lindsay from LAWhammer, from Andy from LAWhammer, obviously Rookery Publications, of course. Mark Gibbons, the artist who made all of the coolest, Warhammeriest stuff you ever saw. I'm now going to try and do the raid. Let's see if that works. I've done it. Let's see if it worked. And I'm going to sign off over on this side and scamper off to the other channel. If you don't get sent over there automatically, do please go and join us. We're over on Rookery Publications on YouTube and on Twitch right now. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye. Maybe. Bye-bye.